the audience. It's impressive that you guys have organized this and that all of you care enough about this to have come out tonight. So thank you. I thought I would start by talking a little bit about my personal history because I am the only New Orleanian, native New Orleanian among the three of us. And then I'll talk a little bit about why I decided to become a historian because I didn't do that until I was 40. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the city's history and Tulane's history, but it's old history, not 1960s. So, I'm old, which means that I was in first grade the day they integrated the schools in New Orleans. And so I lived through the first civil rights movement and Jim Crow. I was born into Jim Crow. My mother was a professor of social work, and she was a professor of social work here at Tulane. That was the part of Tulane University that integrated first in the early 1960s. And so as I was growing up, my mother kept saying, what are you going to do to make this world a better place? And I kept saying, I really want to be an archaeologist. And she was dreadfully disappointed in me and said that is not going to make the world a better place. And so I struggled as I went through college. I was a Greek major. I did become an archaeologist. But then I decided that I really couldn't do that because it wasn't making the world a better place. So I came back to New Orleans from England where I was studying and got a degree in social work. And funnily enough, after getting that degree, I ended up at Tulane in the president's office and eventually as the vice president for public affairs. And for those of you who don't know, that's the person that deals with politics at the university and also with media relations. And I did that for a while in my 30s, and I really hated it because that was definitely not making the world a better place. And I realized, sitting up there in Gibson Hall, that the people who were making the world a better place were the faculty, the professors who teach all of you. And so I thought about it for a long time and decided to quit my job as a vice president. My husband nearly divorced me. And go back to graduate school and get a PhD in history. And I was interested in doing early American history because that's where it all started. That's where slavery started. That's where race started. That's where New Orleans started. I cared passionately about my city, and I knew that most of its early history had not been told from the perspective of the majority of people who lived here. So now I'm going to sort of segue into history. The vast majority of the population of early New Orleans, that is the 1700s and early 1800s, was enslaved, either born in Africa or descended from people born in Africa. But you'd never know it from most of the history books that were written about colonial New Orleans until the 1990s when things started to be published that recognized that the people who built New Orleans, not just literally with their hands, but also culturally, socially, and politically, were African and African descended people. So I've now written 2 books about various aspects of that, and a couple of collected volumes. You can't write about the history of New Orleans, early New Orleans, without knowing French and Spanish. And I think that's one of the reasons why it took such a long time for people to begin to write that history. But that's what I've dedicated my academic career to. And some of you took my New Orleans class, and I'm so glad that you did. I'm also really glad that you didn't write in your comments. I thought this class was going to be about early New Orleans, and it was just about slavery, 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 slavery. And I have to tell you, I got that remark about the class that I taught, the course that I taught in early American history, for the first 5 years that I taught here at Tulane, from 2005 until about 2010. There were still comments in my student evaluations saying, more pilgrims, please, less slavery. And I'm happy to report that that stopped. So I'm heartened, despite what happened in November with the election of a president who seems to want to throw us back into the 19th century. I'm really heartened by you and the way you are now engaging in history, all of the history, and not running away from the less pretty parts of our past. I'm going to say a couple words about Tulane's past specifically. I'm not going to talk very long. I think it's really interesting that Tulane was endowed by and named for a man who came from a family of sugar planters in Saint-Domingue. How many of you know what Saint-Domingue was? A few of you. All right. So you will know it better as Haiti. Haiti, the first place to abolish slavery in the Atlantic world. Before it was Haiti, it was Saint-Domingue, the richest colony in the Atlantic world. You know, we're a little North American-centric here. But the big money in the 18th century was being made in the French sugar colony of Saint-Domingue. The average life of a field worker in Saint-Domingue, someone working in the cane fields, was 7 years. People made so much money growing and producing sugar, refining sugar, selling it all over the world, that it was cheaper for them to work their slaves to death than it was for them to work them less hard. One guy complains, how in the world are we supposed to make money when we only work our slaves 17 hours a day? So, not surprisingly, Saint-Domingue was the place to see the first successful slave rebellion. It wasn't the place to see the first slave rebellion. There were slave rebellions happening everywhere, here in Louisiana, up north in South Carolina, a really famous one called the Stono Rebellion, all over the Caribbean, especially in Jamaica. But this was the first one to succeed. And when I say succeed, I mean it succeeded in bringing about the abolition, the permanent abolition of slavery, and the establishment of the first black republic in the Atlantic world. And it was quite a feat. Now, New Orleans was connected to Saint-Domingue. A lot of people in colonial New Orleans did business in Saint-Domingue, had relatives in Saint-Domingue, bought enslaved laborers from Saint-Domingue. We were, in some ways, some historians would say, we were a colony of Saint-Domingue. That is until the Spanish took over in the 1760s, and then we had to kind of quiet down our connections with Saint-Domingue. But in 1791, when the Haitian Revolution broke out, we began to receive refugees from the Haitian Revolution, and they were refugees of all kinds. Some of them were sugar planters who had been burned out of their sugar plantations by the slave rebels. Some of them were free people of color who believed that it wasn't safe for them to stay in Saint-Domingue, and some of them were people claimed as slaves by planters and free people of color in Saint-Domingue. Slavery was abolished in Saint-Domingue in 1794, so I'm really careful, you see, to say that these were people claimed as slaves by refugees who came from Saint-Domingue. But then, in 1809, something really extraordinary happened that most people don't know about in the history of New Orleans, and that is that in the space of just a few weeks, the population of New Orleans doubled, and it doubled because we received close to 10,000 refugees of the Haitian Revolution. Those refugees were, again, white planters, free people of color, and a third of them, a third of them were people claimed as slaves by those other two groups. 2 years later, in 1811, and I'm not going to talk much about it except to draw a line under the timing. 2 years later, in 1811, the largest slave rebellion in the United States took place, and it took place just upriver from here. It's called the Tulane Rebellion. And I think I'm on safe ground if I say it was at least inspired by the success of the Haitian Revolution. Sadly, it failed. And so there was slavery in Louisiana until the end of the Civil War. But the founder, to get back to Tulane, the founder of Tulane was descended from one of those refugee families. They didn't come to New Orleans then in 1809, but he had business dealings in New Orleans. He made a lot of money. It was money that had its roots in that sugar slavery complex of Saint-Domingue. Tulane had been founded not as Tulane, but as a medical college in the 1830s to look into curing yellow fever, treating yellow fever, which was decimating the city with epidemics practically every year. But Paul Tulane came along and endowed it to be a much grander enterprise, a true university. But true to his roots, a university only for white men. And so the first administrators of Tulane, the first president, Gibson, for whom Gibson Hall is named, were veterans of the Confederate Army. So those are the roots of Tulane as Tulane with that name. And the last thing I'm going to say is that in the 1870s, a women's division was founded for Tulane. And its name was Sophie Newcomb College. And its foundress was very careful in the document that gave money to found Newcomb College that it was being founded to educate white women. So I joke with the classes that I teach that I like to end on a depressing note, so I'll end there and turn it over to, I think, Professor Adderley.
I would say the thing that Professor Clark and I share, I'm a historian of Black experience during the years of slavery. So I said that there's basically, every time I teach, there's more or less one good day. One day slavery ends. And then I have a whole bunch of courses I teach about the ways that didn't fix Black people's circumstances entirely. So you have a bunch of pessimists mixed with a little bit of optimism. Rare for me losing my voice. But I wanted to, rather than, Professor Clark has given you a big context to New Orleans. I want to talk mostly about what stories we choose to tell ourselves about Tulane. For those of you that are history students, a lot of good narrative history, it has an argument, it has an idea, but it's founded on good narrative. And one of the things that I think, and I love the Historical Society for doing this, I actually like the way they framed the sort of uncovering the racial legacy, because there is a part of what we know and how we know it has to do with a set of decisions that we in the present, and also the university makes for us, about how we tell the story of this place, and if this conversation can be starting to tell that story in a different way. And I want to give you my starting point, which is a good follow to what Professor Clark says. I often hear people say today, when they talk about issues of racial exclusion and at Tulane in the present, and the racial exclusion in its past, that this is a shame because of the city of New Orleans. And how can we be an institution in a city with such so profoundly shaped by people of African descent, and indeed those of you who are current students spend so much time interacting with Black experience, consuming culture produced by African Americans, and remain in many ways a demographically very white institution still, and an institution that isn't engaged with its own, to use the Historical Society's words, racial legacy. I always hate that question. All right, and here's why. As our students alluded to, and Professor Clark alluded to, that this is a university that self-consciously started to change itself in the second half of the 20th century. I know Will is in a class with me now, and some of you have taken Africana Studies classes with me on the racial history of Tulane. And it's a very self-conscious moment at the mid-20th century when people try to change. And that may have led to the admission of African Americans, but it also was about transforming the university, how to be less regional, how to be more modern. For those of you who are scientists especially, for all of us in the humanities and social sciences, how to truly be a national research university. So we will become what a quality global university should be. So the mission to be a more honest and more inclusive and a more diverse place is a part of that mission, even if we were sitting on an island in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And so that the argument that, well, it's a shame because of the history of this place. No, it's a shame because of what a university should be. What I wanted to focus on, though, in terms of thinking about the stories that we tell ourselves, I wanted to think about 4 specific stories and watch how much time I have. One is, and I don't know if my student Natalie is here, she handed this to me, so I'm grateful to her. So I was like, how shall I frame this? The first is to think about, as Professor Clark just said, this is a university founded in 1834. All right? This is not just when there is slavery in New Orleans, it's the height of this, you've got all of those planters that came in there from Saint Domingue. They invigorated the sugar economy here, and Tulane was literally founded at the height of the sort of cultures of violence and blood that built that wealth. I have said many times in public interviews when people ask me about how should you understand where Black experience fit in and who was involved, that it's a bit like asking people, how should we understand computer technology in the modern university? It's everywhere. And when we think about a university founded in the city of New Orleans, the slave trading capital of antebellum America, that's literally just had this influx of the most committed slave owners ever known in the Americas, and possibly on the face of the earth. All right, but this is the context in which it was founded. So you can't wash anyone's hands of it. And, that's our history. And that is the founding. It's not Tulane was founded as the Medical College of Louisiana, which is what I think you read on the website. And so it is a choice of how we tell that story. The second story is one, I hope I'm not stealing this because everybody loves this story. When I'm in a mood to shock people, my students, I apologize because you've heard this 1,000 times. If any of you had Dr. Willoughby, who's a graduate of this department for Intro U.S. History, you've heard this 1,000 times. To give you a sense of sort of where we fit and how it's completely embedded and normal. Samuel A. Cartwright, how many of you are Samuel A. Cartwright fans? Oh, come on. Samuel A. Cartwright is a doctor affiliated with Tulane University Medical School. He is notorious and legendary and famous among historians of slavery because he is the person that diagnosed so-called drapetomania, that was the disease that caused enslaved people to run away. That sounds to you like junk science and nonsense, but this wasn't a quack. This was a normal doctor, part of the Tulane Medical School establishment. We have a student now, I'm not sure if Joy is here, who's working on the history of African Americans and race at the medical school. And that we don't talk about that story, all right, is a part of how we choose to remember our history and a certain kind of erasure. There's plenty enough, there's so much material here. Tulane actually should engage with the fact that we have a medical school that decided that it was a sickness, that enslaved people ran away, not that slavery was brutal and violent, and it was a human response to seek to flee it. Not all of the things that we don't tell ourselves are negative and dark. The other sort of Tulane, and it is probably my second favorite Tulane story. How many of you are Steve Martin fans? One or two. Not that Steve Martin, the Tulane Steve Martin. How many of you are football or basketball fans? Come on, some of you. All right. The Southeastern Conference, biggest conference in Southern football. All right. Endless hours of our lives are wasted watching it. What do players look like in Southeast SEC football? LSU, Alabama, Mississippi. All right. All of those African American players. What is the school that opened the door to the SEC for African American players? It's this university. Why do you not know that story? All right? It was Tulane University at the moment as a part of its integration project in the 1960s. All right? It was a Tulane baseball coach that decided that he was going to take the risk 3 years after the school integrated in 1963, in 1966, that he would recruit an African American player from across the river in Algiers to play for Tulane. All right? Both organized and disorganized white supremacists, all right, rang up what was then the Tulane Athletic Department and threatened his life. All right? Tulane forfeited a game at the University of Mississippi because the atmosphere for Steve Martin was so hostile. All right, and I say this to you, particularly for those of you that do any anti-racist work, there's two sets of lies being told. There is an empowering story for white students who seek to transform the institution in that story. And, by erasing Steve Martin, we don't want to talk about segregation because it's nasty and we don't want to be a part of it. And we don't want to think about this as a university that's founded basically out of slave money in the midst of a segregated place that was determined to keep African Americans out. But also by not telling that story, there's a whole set of other stories we choose not to tell. And I think most of Tulane's story around the goals of African American inclusion and exclusion are not nice stories. All right, but you're not told any of these stories. The two things by way of conclusion. People often assume that Tulane remained segregated because essentially racist people ran it and it was sort of bad things in their hearts, that they didn't want race mixing on Tulane's campus. And I'm sure there's plenty of that, and I have some students now engaged with trying to examine what were the motives of individual board members. But I would want you to step back and think about where Tulane fits in the enlarging U.S. society. Emily Clark and I have a colleague and mentor, Professor Gwendolyn Midlow Hall, who transformed the field of early American history. Particularly, she wrote a book on Africans in colonial Louisiana that quite literally changed both of our lives and changed the way people thought about Africanness in this state. When she was a Newcomb College student, she would go to integrated parties with African Americans from the African American colleges in the city. And those parties were broken up by police in service of the white supremacist state. All right? These are the histories of Tulane that you don't engage with because you don't want to talk about it. And I think that one way we can frame this discussion is thinking about what slave money, what white supremacist money founded this place, but the other place is actually thinking about sort of who invested in the change, why it worked, why it didn't work. And the last thing that I want to say, and it's in part to sort of honor, I sit here, and we all sit here in this room legally and able to do it because of two African American women from the city, Barbara Guillory and Pearlie Elwha, who were Tulane often likes to say it's integrated voluntarily. Not exactly. They wished to attend university here, one as a graduate student in sociology, the other as a student in social work, and they sued. And there was a long, extended battle over whether or not a private university could be forced to integrate, or was it subject to the same 14th Amendment guidelines. And Tulane fought that to the bitter end. They had Skelly Wright, who was one of the justices, the judge that was responsible for a lot of pro-desegregation rulings in the city. He ruled in favor of these two plaintiffs, and Tulane asked for a rehearing. All right, in the fall of 1862, said, no, we do not want to be forced. We want to maintain our status as private so we can choose to do what we want. They got a ruling in their favor that says, you're right, you're private. Maybe. But the judge actually said at the time, with federal investment in higher education by which you are trying to prove yourself, you're going to have to choose to integrate, so choose. And we don't know those women's stories. It's likewise a choice. By deciding not to talk about the white supremacy and the most unclean money that founded everything we stand for, we also then choose to erase the pathways to change. And I think it's also the reason why we kind of stalled. That we essentially admitted African Americans, never had a conversation about what a modern university should be in terms of inclusion, never had a conversation about how to redress the fact that this was a university not founded for everybody. And by erasing a certain package of stories, it's lose-lose. And I'll leave it there.